Before I get into my talk, I want to show you a poster that was brought here by Eldon McClory, who is sitting right here. Eldon worked in the West for many, many years, and for 4 years he worked at the Red Rock National Wildlife Refuge in Montana. And he worked, one of the things he did was working with this bird, which was the trumpeter swan. Now the Red Rock area was used later on to seed future swan introductions in Minnesota. And one of the jobs that Eldon told me he did is he went out and for 3 or 4 years he helped feed trumpeter swans at the Red Rock National Wildlife Refuge with grain, wheat grain. He'd bring it out on this thing called a weasel. It looked like a snowmobile. He'd go out and they throw the wheat out in the water. It would settle in because swans eat their food in the water. So I thought it was pretty neat that he brought this old poster. And this is 1941, this poster was. Now, Eldon was there in the 50s? 58 to 61. He got his degree at Missoula, where my son lives now at the university, and his lovely wife also got her degree there, right, Eldon? So that's the deal with that. And what I'm going to do then is get into a discussion of the trumpeter swan recovery program. This is an example of the most successful story that I think I've ever heard of, and I see George is shaking his head. He would agree with me, wouldn't you, George? Everything went well. This was a long road, but it was a 37-year from 1987 to 2024, and it involved research, management, and collaboration. And the guy that put this talk together is Sumner Madison. I should say a little bit about him. He's our bird guy. He's still working for DNR. When I was there, it was with the Bureau of Endangered Resources. Now it's called Natural Heritage Conservation. And one of the books that Sumner wrote is called A Field. And it's about a lot of old WDNR biologists who worked in the field, and some of their stories, like the Hammerstroms, Fred and Fran Hammerstrom, which I had the pleasure of working with. So if you get a chance, I guess we're going to put it on our website, right, Rick? I would strongly recommend it. And one of the things, Sumner's father, Sumner's from Minnesota, Sumner's dad, Robert Madison, was the subject of Sumner's new book about how his father, working for intelligence in the United States Army, captured a high-ranking Nazi in 1945 as part of his thing, and Sumner's brother helped put this book together. It's available right now, and the Nazi's name is Kaltenbrunner. He was a real high-up Nazi in Europe, and it's a very interesting story. So Sumner comes from a very interesting background. He went with his father on many canoe trips. He learned birds and went to school in Minnesota, and he's, as I said, he's still working for the DNR. And the other people on here, Randy Jurowitz, who can't be here today because of health problems, and the rest of the people you see have been working for DNR. Pat Nancy, Mike Mossman, Lisa Hartman. Ed Diebold worked for the Milwaukee Zoo, and he was a curator of birds there. And Becky Abel was Stan Temple's student at UW-Madison, so we have a lot of close cooperation there. But the one thing you're going to get, hopefully, out of watching this is all the people and all the resources that combine to make this a very successful program. Let's see if I can get this. And there are some of the people. Mike, you can see him trying to herd swans there. Lisa, Becky, and Ed Diebold is in the bottom picture holding that plaque. I believe he's passed away. Sumner Madison on the left, and Randy Jurowitz is on the right. So these are some of the many, many people that are working with this. Now, a little bit of background with trumpeter swans, and that's John Audubon on the upper right-hand corner. And the pictures you see below him are a millinery factory in the East Coast where they use swan feathers for powder puffs and for ladies' hats and garments. And that was one of the reasons why trumpeter swans disappeared in Wisconsin and much of the lower United States because of the demand. And illegal hunting, habitat loss were the other factors that really helped. Now, the map is kind of hard to read, but on the top here is an area where eventually we got the trumpeter swan eggs. You'll see that as being one of the sources of trumpeter swan production in North America. And these other areas are the wintering and breeding. The yellow is the breeding areas, and some of the areas are migration routes down here and down here on the coast. Now, here's a quote historically from Father Marquette, which I think a lot of you realize that he was one of the first Europeans to come into Wisconsin and look and see what was going on. He came all the way down the Mississippi River from the top all the way to the Illinois border. And this is one of his comments as he came down in, I think this is 1673, a long time ago. And just pay attention to the last part. We saw only deer and cattle, which were bison, bustards, large birds, probably hawks and eagles, and swans without wings because they dropped their plumage in the country. What he was referring to there is the annual molt of the feathers of a lot of the waterfowl, ducks, geese, and swans. Now, this is the goal of the trumpeter swan program. 20 breeding and migratory pairs by the year 2000. Just keep thinking about that. In the 1980s, here in Wisconsin, we had zero, I repeat, zero trumpeter swans. And so to have a goal like this by the year 2000 was pretty ambitious. Now, the first technique, and we tried a different series of techniques, was called cross fostering. We did that, here, let me get back. We did that in 1987-88. It was not a success because of that turtle, the snapping turtle you see in the middle, on the far left. And that turtle caused a lot of mortality. With what we did is we used mute swans. See the orange bill? That's how you can tell them. They have an arched neck, unlike trumpeters, which have a straight neck and all black bill. And the other swan, very close to the trumpeter in size, are the tundra swans. They used to be called the whistling swans. And you can see Mike working here, trying to get these mute swans off the nest. We took eggs from state game farms. And originally the idea was put them in a nest, get mute swans, act as their surrogate parents, hatch them out, and everything would be fine. Well, it didn't work out that way because of this guy right here, primarily. Only one animal, one egg survived all that business. So what to do? What to do next? Well, here's where the Kohlers come in. And I think George probably met Terry and Mary at one time. Now, Terry Kohler is a very interesting guy, to say the least. And the one thing about Terry, he loved big birds. He loved cranes, he loved swans, and he liked to donate money in support of helping them. So how did we change from the old the cross fostering? Well, we did what they call the Alaskan Trumpeter Swan Egg Collection. And those are the years, 89 through 97. And what these were wild trumpeter swan eggs. And Eldon McClory, there's their pilot, right there. This guy's was Rod King. He was a Fish and Wildlife Service pilot that flew us from Fairbanks into these areas of minnow flats. You can see there, and the big wetland areas up in Alaska. And then Sumner and Randy would collect the eggs, bring them in, put them in this device there, which initially was a big suitcase with hot water bottles to keep the eggs at a certain temperature so they wouldn't get too cold or too hot. And Rod King narrated one episode they had in 1989, the first time they went out in a pontoon plane and landed next to a swan nest, that one of the swans attacked the plane and actually tore the antenna off a float plane like this one right here. And Sumner, on more than one occasion, had to go in the water and swim to get to the nest, to pick it out and bring it back in, which was no easy task, I'll tell you. Now here's the results of all the collection years. You can see that we got a lot of good viable eggs. Whoops, let's see what the heck, what happened there? Okay. We got all these eggs here. I think they're 385, and the percentage hatch is 93%, and that's opposed to 80% tops in the wild hatch success rate. So you can see it was pretty good. And all these eggs went to these different programs that I'm about to tell you. Here's one of the two programs. The first one was called the Swan Decoy Rearing Program. Dr. Stan Temple came up with this idea, and Becky Abel, his student, helped him do this, where they would take these swans, they would be hatched, they'd put them in this area which was boarded up by big sheets of plywood along with a plastic mother swan, and then the baby swan cygnets would attach and imprint themselves to this mechanical bird. You didn't dare have them look at any human beings, because if these young birds saw humans, they would become attached and imprinted to humans. And then we had people out in the other area, like Marty Johnson over here. He had this float camouflage things keeping track of them. You can see them going out in the wetlands after they got a little bit bigger. And then the other thing we later did was we put neck collars on them, and then after that we put radio transmitters on them. And then the other segment was a captive rearing program, where the young swans raised in captivity in a fenced pond for 2 years and released wetlands in northern Wisconsin. And you can see them releasing them down here in this picture. And this is Maureen Gross, who worked at Amoco and some of these privately owned areas where they were fenced in. The birds were clipped so they couldn't fly away. And that was another pretty successful. And one of them was BP Amoco at Naperville, Illinois. You can see the young birds here in this one right here. Now, the criteria for selection of the release sites when the birds got a little bit bigger were the following. You can see that mainly you wanted to have, whoops, I keep hitting the wrong one. You want to have somebody with, there's no hunting there, abundant emergent vegetation, minimal human use, no power lines, and a lot of wetlands within 10 miles of the release site. And all these people in the proximity to the DNR, Fish and Wildlife Service maintenance facilities, and absence of islands or dikes approximately for overnight cages. So that was one of the set of criteria. Whoops, it's not going. There. And then total result of this was we had all the following numbers of birds that were successfully hatched, and the decoy rearing and the captive rearing, you can see that was roughly 89% of the rest were other types. And that was the most successful. Here you can see people that being released into the areas after they were big enough to fly and nest. And then we had to monitor the WITRUS. Just simply means Wisconsin Trumpeter Restoration Flock. And we had to do aerial surveys to locate the nest, and ground truth to determine clutch size, and that's what Pat Manthe is doing right here. August flight to locate the families and count the young, the cygnets, and then the various roundups. And that meant people going out in canoes and capturing these birds and putting bands on them, leg bands, neck bands. They took blood samples for blood disease, DNA sexing, and weighing of each bird. There's a picture of them trying to capture these swans, which was no easy thing, believe me. And there they're being weighed, and then they were released at the Cranberry Marsh in the Yellow River. Cranberry marshes were an important part of the whole program because those were wetlands. They had abundant food for the swans to eat, and that worked out very well. We had good cooperation with most of the people. And the first roundup was at Wood County in 2012, and there was a gang there. It took a lot of people to do all this. And just remember now, the Kohlers were one of the primary heavy hitters for money, but there was a whole bunch of others we'll get to in a minute. What happened with the nesting pairs? Remember, the goal was 20 breeding or migratory pairs by the year by the year 2000. And you can see that we got to that very early in the game. Here's 50. Here's, and by 2024 we had 70, all the way up to 2013, 250 pairs. So you can't ask for better results than that. It really was wonderful. And there's the distribution of the trumpeter swan nests by ecological landscape. And you can see that up in the northwest, where there's nearly 61% of the birds were up in here, and the other part was in the northeast. That was 20.9%, and a lower number down in the south. So the northern area was the prime trumpeter swan nest area. Now, breeding characteristics of habitat. Breeding habitat characteristics, rather. They had to be shallow, with a food of various marshes, ponds, and emergent vegetation such as wild rice or Sagittaria, several waterfowl production areas, dominated by wild rice, cattail sedges, etc., down on the as you go. And one thing to remember is the nests are often constructed on small island inlets. They're on the top of either beaver lodges or muskrat houses, which they were big. I can tell you, they were about the size of a small Volkswagen. And for migration and wintering, that map up there is not the easiest to read, but some of them, the shortest migration was in Hudson, Wisconsin area. The longest one was 607 miles, the Union County wildlife area in southwestern Illinois, which I visited when I was a student at Carbondale. And then the example of these were cranberry lands, reclaimed strip mines, and areas managed for waterfowl. And the program was so successful that in October 2009, trumpeters were officially delisted. And that's pretty good when you consider there was zero in the 1980s. In a relatively short period, they were delisted. Now, the lessons learned. This is interesting too. Have clear, obtainable research or management objectives. Have a good funding strategy. And remain open to new, different approaches, which we did. Decoy rearing swans on the Indian reservation, that was another different. And recruit and build on partnerships. When I was a young researcher for DNR, we did wildlife research within DNR. That was it. And now when I see all the different partners, the federal, the state, the private, all help and make the thing even better. And celebrate success with partners, learn from disappointments and failures, and persist. Our people were very persistent, that's for sure. Now, these to give you an idea what the aerial surveys look like. This one was from 2015. This guy, Taylor Finger, is a current waterfowl biologist for DNR. He was the observer in these planes that looked for where the nests were located. And that's what it looked like from the plane's viewpoint. Again, these are wetlands, no mystery about that. That's where the swans like to go for their nests. And because they're a big bird, they stood out pretty well. You can see them quite easily here in this, or the one on the left is at the nest, and the adult, they do pair for life, by the way. And how old do they get? Well, this was a 26-year-old one. And that was collected as an egg in '89. And they got it in 2015 in Burnett County. So the average age of trumpeter swans is about 15 years. And these two maps show you the primary breeding bird atlas. That's what WBBAI is. When the first year results came in, and here's the 9th year. Look at the difference. They spread all over the place. Couldn't be better. Now, what's a population? That's what swan breeding population was, BPOP. And we used groups of, excluding groups of 5 or more, 112 swans were recorded in the 2024 population estimate. With all these formulas and stuff like that, what you got to look at is the end result. The end result was 14,781, which was up to 26,000 individuals. So you can see that we got a little bit of over the top in terms of population size. Very, very accurate, very good results. And now here are all the partners. It'll take me all day to read off all these. But there was prairie chicken people, there was the riverbanks, the cranberry growers, the Indian tribes, the Friends of Creeks Meadows, on and on and on. You can see they all chipped in, and a lot of them gave sizable amount of support in terms of manpower and money. And that ends the story, and there's a pair of trumpeter swans symbolizing a very successful story.